Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Z, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, we are talking about our physical health and how narcissistic abuse impacts our bodies. Our brain and our bodies are connected whether we like it or not. In this episode, I'm going to talk all about the physical ailments that tend to show up when you are in narcissistic abuse, when you are in that coercive, controlling relationship, when you're in that trauma bonded relationship, what it looks like, what you can do about it, and why it happens. I find that so many people really kind of have this block on how their situation impacts them physically. And I really think that's because for so long in society, we've been taught our brain and our body are separate, but they're not. So I hope this episode helps you to understand that brain-body connection, why it occurs, particularly in narcissistic abusive relationships, and what you can do to heal yourself, not just emotionally, but also physically. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, we are talking all about narcissistic abuse and its effect and its impact on our physical self and our bodies. This is a topic that I find in my practice to not only is it neglected often, but it's also extremely misunderstood. Being in the field of psychology, I was trained to understand that the body and the brain are one. They are not separate entities. And I think in today's society, in today's society, we're often taught that they're two very separate things. There's our mind and there's our body, and they do not interact. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Our brains and our bodies are one, and you really need to think about yourself in terms of how those two things are connected. To only consider one at a time is really not giving you the full picture and not going to help you understand why it is that your body's responding a certain way in a narcissistic abusive relationship. So let's first talk about some of the things that you may have experienced or are experiencing in terms of your physical health when you are in these types of coercive, controlling, narcissistic, abusive, manipulative relationships. Let's start from our head and go down to our toes. Starting with our head, things that you may notice: chronic headaches, migraines, confusion, a chronic fogginess that you're feeling. I'll have a lot of people tell me, at the age of 40 or 50, that they are convinced that they are going through early onset dementia, when really it's your brain and your body responding to chronic narcissistic abuse. Forgetfulness is a big one. Not being able to make really easy decisions. For example, should you wear the red shirt or the green shirt today? Something that in the past wouldn't even occur to you. You would have just grabbed it. But for some reason now, making the smallest of decisions seems like an impossible task. And you don't know why. You just can't do it. Our vision starts to change, which seems kind of out of nowhere, maybe. Things are blurry, or, you're not able to focus your vision as well. You just can't see as well. Things like not noticing certain details, let's say. So you're seeing it, but your brain's not registering it. This is why there happens to be a lot of accidents, car accidents, backing into something, a lot of misplacing things, and not because the narcissist did it on purpose, but because you genuinely can't find stuff. You become more clumsy. You become way less aware of your surroundings. These are all things cognitively that occur, visually occur, after you've been in this type of relationship for an extended period of time, and I'll get into why that is. Um, Colds. You don't just get colds anymore. You get them all the time and you get the flu. You don't just get, you know, a sore throat. You are getting COVID. You're getting respiratory infections. So everything is heightened. And this is because your immune system is completely shot. And again, I'll explain why in a little bit. Things like shortness of breath, right? Difficulty getting that big breath in. Moving down our body more, your shoulders. They are so tense. Your entire body is tense. You now have back pain, joint pain, neck pain. You never had it before. You've gotten a different mattress, a new pillow. You take Advil, but it's just chronic. And so because of this, you stop exercising, you stop working out, you stop taking walks, you stop running, you stop playing tennis. You just tire so easily. You have this constant heavy fatigue that no matter how well rested you think you are, it just continues to follow you. You're noticing these weird pain symptoms. Maybe you've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Maybe you've been diagnosed as, quote, all in your head, but you know you have these random aches and pains, and no matter what you do, you can't get rid of them. Your stomach is a mess. Maybe you've been diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. Maybe you are extremely constipated. You're also urinating a lot. It doesn't necessarily match up to your fluid intake anymore. You're peeing all the time. Your stomach's in pain constantly. Rashes. You are experiencing weird rashes. You're experiencing horrible breakouts on your face, and you've never had breakouts before. You're experiencing extremely painful and heavy periods. Or the opposite, you stopped getting your period altogether, and you're nowhere near menopause, and you're not pregnant. Things like fingers. Your fingers frequently feel numb. Your extremities in general feel numb. You don't know why. It's just this tingling, right? We talked about backaches and back pain. Things like when you do have sex, it's extremely painful. You don't know why. Things like knee pain. Things like plantar fasciitis. All of these random physical conditions that you never had before. In fact, you were quite healthy. Blood pressure is high. Your lab work looks horrific. All of your levels are off. Again, you don't know why. You start developing these weird flare-ups of autoimmune diseases. Okay. Things that you never had before. Now you're getting flare-ups. And so you can imagine that in addition to all of the mental health difficulties that you're having in this type of relationship, on top of all that, you have all these cognitive difficulties now. You have visual difficulties. You have physical difficulties. You feel sick all the time. You feel slow and sluggish, and you're just in pain. You can't get over a simple cold anymore. Okay. Your heart rate is constantly elevated. You constantly feel like you're having a panic attack, even though you know you're not. And you just feel terrible. So, for those of you listening to these symptoms and you're thinking, oh my God, yes, I feel this way. I feel this way all the time. Or, oh my gosh, I never understood why my hair started falling out. This makes total sense. So let me explain to you why this happens frequently in the context of narcissistic abuse. So let's start real simple. Let's say that a lion is chasing you down the street. You're going to do one of two things, really. You're going to run like hell to save your life, or you're going to freeze. Okay. So when you see a lion running down the street, okay, and let's say that you run. You run because your body just had a surge in cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone, right? So we release this burst of cortisol, and it sends a message to our brain and our bodies that we're in danger and you better handle the situation or we're going to die. And it doesn't matter what the situation is, but that's the message that gets sent to your brain, whether it's a lion or whether it's, a car turning fast, or whether it's your narcissistic, abusive husband or wife coming home at the end of the day from work and hearing their footsteps or hearing the garage door open or the front door slam. So you have this burst of cortisol, right? Sends a message to our brain, okay, you're in trouble, you got to run, right? You see this lion charging towards you, and so you bolt. There's a couple things that are happening when you bolt. Because your cortisol levels are spiking, it's doing a couple things to keep your body safe in that situation. Your blood pressure is going to become elevated, your heart rate's going to increase. Your breathing is going to become very rapid, but also simultaneously very shallow. You don't have time to take these very long, deep breaths, or you'll die standing there trying to take these breaths, right? You won't get your oxygen fast enough to be able to run. Other things happen, like your focus and your concentration become extremely narrow. You are only taking in what is directly in front of you so that you can escape. You're not noticing the plane flying overhead. You're not noticing the blue car that's passing by you. All you're noticing is directly what's in front of you so you can get the hell out of there. Everything else you don't notice. Okay. The other thing that happens is that your body becomes extremely tight and tense. Even your intestines become extremely restricted. Okay. So your body tenses up. Okay. All of these things happen when your cortisol levels spike as a way to protect you. It's your body doing what it should be doing. Even though it feels like shit, your body's doing what it should be doing. Once you're safe from this animal, now your cortisol levels can decrease. You're no longer in danger. And with that decrease comes a decrease in heart rate, decrease in the shallow breathing, decrease in your blood pressure, your vision becomes normal again, your body relaxes. All of these things start to occur because now you're safe. And that response is exactly how our brains and our bodies are equipped to deal with trauma. But here's the problem. They're equipped to deal with short-term trauma. Our brains and our bodies are not equipped to deal with long-term, chronic, ongoing traumatic events. And this is why during COVID, when the extreme fear and, we were allowed back in the world, all this stuff, once that was over, so many people were reporting this kind of general fatigue. It's like this fogginess that everybody was reporting afterwards, that they're just tired. They don't want to socialize. They're just exhausted and they just feel so like bleh. And that's because our brains and our bodies were in fight or flight mode for like 2 years, even still. And if your brain and body are in constant fight or flight mode for 2 years, yeah, your body's going to feel exhausted and foggy, 100%, because we're not equipped to deal with it for that long. It's like a light switch. It's on and it's off. Like like the tiger or the lion chasing you down the street, on then off. Return to business as usual, right? As far as your body's saying. But with COVID, it was like we were on a dimmer switch. It was never fully on or off. It was in this constant, like, raise up, raise down, raise up, raise down. And your brain and your body are just like out of whack at this point. So when it ended, which it never really ended because it's still there. So there was never this beginning, middle, and end, like an isolated event. It's chronic. And so with that comes a chronic burst, decrease, burst, decrease, burst, decrease of cortisol levels. And I cannot stress to you enough how damaging that is to our physical self. So for those of you who are receiving treatment for narcissistic abuse or abusive trauma in your history and your past, if you are not first and foremost working on how to regulate your nervous system, your breathing, your blood pressure, being present in the moment, acknowledging how you feel physically and learning to regulate that with your breathing, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. It will not help. Maybe for like a little bit, but then it goes right back. Talking about your abuse and just talking, venting, will do nothing in therapy. I cannot stress that to you enough, okay? This is why talk therapy for trauma and narcissistic abuse, it doesn't work. Our bodies are too involved to neglect that. You have to learn how to regulate your nervous system. You must be doing that in therapy. If you're not, find another therapist. Making a blanket statement. So, in narcissistic abusive relationships, this is the equivalent. Ready? So, you have a tiger chasing you, and you respond accordingly. But then, even when the tiger is not there, it's not gone. Maybe it's there, it's lurking around a corner. You never know if you step out, if it's going to start chasing you again. You don't know if it's just going to jump on you out of nowhere. You don't know if it's going to come back in the middle of the night. You don't know if it's going to come back in the morning. You don't know if it's going to come back in a month, a year, it could be tomorrow, it could be right now. And because of that uncertainty, your cortisol levels are constantly elevated because you're basically telling yourself you're constantly in danger, which you are. And so your cortisol levels are constantly elevated. And even if they decrease a little, they're not going back to baseline. They're going back to this new heightened baseline, which is still too high. So not only are your cortisol levels constantly elevated, but it's serving this weird purpose to keep you safe when it's kind of in a way what your body's supposed to be doing. But it's for acute trauma, not long-term chronic trauma. Okay? Because here's the thing. When the lion's chasing you down the street, tiger's chasing you down the street, you get away and then you're safe. You're done. It's gone and it's never coming back. But in narcissistic abuse, the abuse is always there, even if it's not. And so you're never safe. So your brain is constantly getting the message that you're not safe. And therefore, you're always at elevated cortisol levels. So why is that a problem? Because there's that intermittent reinforcement schedule in narcissistic abuse. And all that means is a fancy way to say you never know when it's going to happen, what level. You never know like what you need to do, shouldn't do. It happens for no rhyme or reason. And so it's extremely confusing because none of it's your fault, yet you feel like it's your fault. So you never know what you're going to get, meaning you never know if the tiger is going to jump out and bite you, not bite you, give you a break, not bite. I mean, it's so uncertain. And so when we have chronically elevated cortisol levels, what happens to your body and your brain is that you experience constant inflammation. Okay. Chronic inflammation causes, I don't want to give a percentage here. I am not an MD. However, I can tell you, and the research shows this, that inflammation is pretty much the cause for a majority of the illnesses in the world. Okay. So it puts you at a higher risk for increased blood pressure problems. It puts you at a higher risk for cancer, for heart disease. Okay. It puts you at higher risk for not being able to heal from wounds as fast. It puts you at higher risk for, as I said before, not just getting a cold, but you're going to get the worst of it because your immune system is shot to hell. Inflammation wreaks havoc on our bodies. So again, if you're in therapy and you're just talking, it's not helping. You have to regulate your nervous system to reduce the cortisol levels, to reduce the inflammation. It is not coincidence that your hair is falling out. It is not coincidence that you have sharp shooting pains all over your body. Your body is in this constant elevated state of inflammation. So that is why our physical health is so unbelievably important when we're talking about narcissistic abuse. Okay. It's not something that you can ignore in your treatment. And here's the other thing. A lot of times people who are in narcissistic abusive relationships at the time, they don't realize it's abuse, right? But they do know that something's not right. They know something's wrong, but they can't figure out what it is. And because they can't figure out what it is, it's really difficult to tell people outside of the relationship. One, because you don't even know how to put it into words. But second, everybody thinks the person that you're with is super charming. And can you imagine going outside of that bubble to tell somebody that, you're experiencing horrible stomach pains, chronic pains, you've been diagnosed with IBS, you don't know what's wrong, but you think the relationship's causing it? I mean, no one's going to say that because they can't even put it into words. They don't understand and they can't explain it. And they're scared probably that people are going to look at them like they're nuts. They just know they don't feel good. And they know that it started during the relationship, but they can't figure out why. They have been to doctor after doctor after doctor. And yet they can't find anything wrong. Right? They just know their blood work's out of whack, or maybe their blood work's not even out of whack. But they are so pain ridden. They have just joint pains and headaches and fogginess, but yet there's nothing on any brain scans. There's nothing showing up in any MRIs. Everything looks, quote, normal. So not only do you already feel, quote, crazy in the relationship as far as your sense of self and not knowing who you can trust and knowing that you can't trust your own perception of things. And now you're going to doctors and you're convinced something's wrong with you, but they're telling you nothing's wrong with you. And they're telling you it's in your head. And I have seen this happen time and time again because you have doctors and it's not necessarily, it's their responsibility to know, but I understand why they don't know. If you're going to your cardiologist and they're telling you, no, there's nothing wrong. Everything's fine. Everything's working as it should be. Maybe you're just really stressed and anxious. Now, again, that's somehow your fault. Or, you're getting constant stomach pains, but nothing's there. You can't find anything, or chronic shooting pains in your arms and your extremities, or your fingers are numb, but nothing's wrong. Imagine going to the doctor multiple times for this. They're going to make you feel like it's in your head. And not necessarily in a malicious way, but you can imagine how being told nothing's wrong with you, but yet you have these symptoms. They're real. It's extremely upsetting. It's extremely confusing. So for those of you listening who find yourself in this situation, it is very highly likely that the reason you're having these symptoms that are very real is because your body is inflamed from the constant spike in cortisol that you're experiencing because your brain and your body are constantly thinking it's in danger. But it's not. It's a false alarm. in the sense that a tiger is not chasing you. Now, are you in danger? Yes, you are in danger in different ways. Absolutely. Your mental health is in danger. Your physical self is in danger. But because it's in that intermittent cycle that I'm talking about, the never knowing what you're going to get, you have these periods of everything's great in the relationship, right? I hear this all the time. When it's good, it's great. But when it's bad, it's just absolutely freaking terrible. And so, along with those ups and downs, that's how your body's going to feel too. So if you notice that your body and your pain and your headaches and your confusion is kind of following that course, this like worsening and getting better, worsening and getting better, see if it correlates to those good moments, bad moments in your relationship, in a narcissistic abusive relationship. But sometimes you don't know you're in these relationships. You don't know. You, like I said before, you can't put your finger on it. So for those of you who feel that way, take a look at your physical self. Take note of your symptoms and these patterns. And if these things sound familiar to you, it's your body telling you something's not right. And for a lot of people, that's the first indicator for them because maybe they're not as in tune to their mental wellness or their, you know, their sense of self because they've been detached from it for so long. But what they do notice is their physical symptoms. And I use this a lot with people as their anchor point to really focus on abuse that is happening in the relationship. And sometimes it's the first indicator to them that something's really wrong. And people sometimes gravitate towards physical symptoms because for them it just makes more sense or it's easier to notice or it's more comfortable to notice than having to turn inward and focus on yourself. So sometimes I just tell people for now, until it gets a little easier, focus on your physical symptoms. Notice that they're there. Notice a pattern in them. Because if it fits, then you can start to figure out how you can regroup, how you can get help, and how you can start to set boundaries or move forward in leaving the relationship. It's sometimes just easier for people to focus on their physical symptoms than it is their emotional. And that's fine. That's fine. As long as you're focusing on something. And here's what I'll end with. You are not crazy. In fact, far from. Your body is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. The problem is that you're not being chased by a tiger. You're in a relationship where you are being coercively controlled, manipulated, and abused. And because of that chronic nature and that cycle of narcissistic abuse, the love bombing and the discarding, and the hoovering back into the love bombing and this intermittent, back and forth, you're on a dimmer switch. You're constantly being jolted with these releases of chemicals that are elevating inflammation in your body, that are keeping you sick. So you're not crazy. There is a very good reason for why these things are happening. And I promise you that as you gain the strength to leave the narcissistic abusive relationship or to set serious limits and boundaries, let's say if it's a parent or a friend or a colleague, you're going to notice a direct impact on your physical health. You're going to notice that you are slowly starting to feel like you can breathe. You're sleeping better. You're less confused. You're less foggy. Your pain is not as frequent, not as severe, and the duration becomes shorter and shorter. You're going to notice that you're not getting as sick. You're missing fewer days of work now. You have more energy to be social. You have more energy to do things that you loved doing that you stopped doing because your body just hurt or you were just exhausted. You just couldn't make decisions anymore. You're going to find your productivity at work starts to increase. All of these things start to happen once you become aware of the abusive cycle And once you become aware of the blueprint and you gain control over that and you gain that empowerment, and you start to set limits and boundaries, or you disconnect altogether, I promise you that your physical health is going to start to improve. You're going to regain this sense of control over your physical self that for so long you didn't have. And that was also not your fault. So I hope this episode was helpful. I hope that those of you listening are able to more effectively connect the dots now and to know that this didn't come out of left field. There is a very clear reason for why you are feeling the way you are feeling. And again, to end on this, if you are in therapy, processing the abuse, working on the abuse, and you have never learned strategies to self-regulate your nervous system, breathing, all of that, sleep hygiene strategies, you really need to look for somebody who specializes in that because it is so important. Otherwise, like I said before, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound that's just going to continue to bleed and get infected. So you are not crazy. It is not your fault, and you can get better. I will speak to everybody next time on Next Up Narcissism. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Z, and I am thrilled to announce the launch of my summer support series, Narcissistic Abuse Live Virtual Support Group. This is for those who are either currently experiencing narcissistic abuse or who have experienced narcissistic abuse in relationships of all kinds. You can register for the support group series on my website, drjamiezuckerman.com, and click the Workshops tab and scroll until you see Summer Support Series Live Virtual Support Group. This is a 4-session support group. Each group is an hour long from July 8th, July 15th, July 22nd, and July 29th, Mondays, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, to register and to get more info, head to my website, drjamiezuckerman.com, click on the Workshops tab, or if you have any questions or need additional information, please email info@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's info@drjamiezuckerman.com. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. I hope you found it useful, but most importantly, I hope you found it validating. Want to work one-on-one with me? Visit my website at drjamiezuckerman.com to book a personalized coaching session, and be sure to check out my on-demand workshops on topics like co-parenting with a narcissist, life after leaving, anxiety management strategies, and more. Again, that's drjamiezuckerman.com. You'll also find links to my interactive workbooks, merchandise, resources, and newsletter sign-up. Next Up Narcissism is as much your podcast as it is mine. I want to hear your feedback and what you want to hear. So make sure to leave a podcast review wherever you listen or send an email to nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune in next week to see what's up next on Next Up Narcissism.